That 42nd floor boardroom reeked of old money and cold, cheap judgment. Lucas Bennett stood at the head of the table, surrounded by the arrogant Hawthorne family. They were the type who measured their own worth by silencing others. They smirked and constantly interrupted. They quietly implied that his hard-earned success was actually their birthright. Then Lucas closed his laptop and stood up. And facing $900 million on the table, he walked away with his pride. You and I know that some souls simply refuse to be bought. The Manhattan skyline burned orange through the glass as Lucas Bennett stepped from the elevator, ready to defend his dignity. His shoes made absolutely no sound on their cold marble. The receptionist did not even greet him. She only gestured down the corridor, assuming this self-made outsider already knew his place. He had entered these arrogant, wealthy rooms before, and he had never once been truly welcomed. Lucas had built his tech startup from a tiny room above a queen's laundromat. 8 hard years, no inheritance, no wealthy connections to open doors. No expensive bought Ivy League degree. He mastered the algorithms himself and hired his engineers one by one, personally signing every single paycheck for the first 3 tough years. By age 34, his company handled major data for 62 of the Fortune 500. Let's remember, the billionaires had begged him first, not the other way around. David Mercer was already waiting right outside the door. He held the folders, wearing the guarded look of a man who knew they would try to exploit them. He had been Lucas's trusted CFO since the laundromat days, the only person who had witnessed every painful step of his rise, including when he ate cold rice so he could pay his staff first. "They are already inside," David said quietly. "All 3 of them." Charles brought his sister and his son. "That was not on the agenda," Lucas replied. "No, it wasn't." The boardroom was designed to intimidate, stretching out needlessly. A massive mahogany table dominated the center of the room, polished to reflect the artificial ceiling lights like cold, still water. The snobbish family refused to stand when Lucas entered. Charles Hawthorne sat at the far end, gray hair slicked back. He folded his hands with the tedious patience of a man who owned everything. Directly to his right sat his sister Vivian, wearing a designer suit worth more than most cars. To his left was his son Daniel, showing off a pricey Ivy League ring. He wore a condescending smirk that challenged Lucas's right to be there. Lucas sat down, keeping his quiet, unbuyable dignity. Charles opened the meeting with a brief remark. It sounded like polite praise, but felt like a cheap trap. "Mr. Bennett, we have reviewed the materials your team sent over. Impressive growth, highly aggressive margins. We would like to understand the operations behind those numbers." "Of course," Lucas answered quietly. "Where would you like to start?" Daniel asked, oozing rich arrogance. He leaned back, tapping his pen as if he already owned the place. "Let's start with the architecture. Your white paper from 2023 references a proprietary indexing layer. I'd love to know who actually designed it." "I did," Lucas said. Lucas replied proudly, "I wrote the original framework in 2020. My team has expanded it since." Daniel let his breath hang, a cheap power play meant to intimidate. "Self-taught, correct? No formal background in distributed systems, correct?" "Fascinating." He said it with the quiet disdain of a man who buys people. Vivian set down her glass with a delicate, cold click of authority. "Mr. Bennett, forgive me. The numbers you've presented are extraordinary. But extraordinary numbers in our experience usually have extraordinary explanations. Sometimes those explanations are not in the room." Lucas met her cold gaze. "I'm not sure I follow." "What she means," Charles droned, his voice dripping with board privilege, "is that companies of your size growing at your pace often have what we call a quiet engine. A senior architect, a former executive. Someone who prefers to stay off the cap table. We'd like to know if such a person exists inside your company." The insulting accusation hung heavy. Lucas felt the room turn freezing cold. David stopped writing, sensing the corporate trap. He had expected these wealthy sharks to try and undermine Lucas from the start. He had hoped to be wrong. "There is no quiet engine," Lucas said firmly. "There is a team. I built it. I lead it. The architecture is mine. The strategy is mine." Daniel chuckled, a sound of mocking, wealthy pity. "That's a very confident answer. It's a true one." Charles raised his hand slightly, a lazy gesture of absolute power. A tiny movement, and the whole room bent to his money. Confidence is admirable, Mr. Bennett, but confidence is not the same as readiness. Aperture is approaching a stage where the variables become global. Regulatory complexity, cross-border infrastructure, public scrutiny of a kind that frankly eats young founders alive. He let his threat hang in the air, expecting Lucas to break. What we would like to propose as a condition of moving forward is the placement of a senior executive into the role of operating chief. Someone we trust. You would of course retain your title, founder, chief executive in name. But the operational voice of the company going forward would belong to someone with a longer record. Vivian smiled coldly. She offered the plastic grin of a billionaire pretending to be generous. Think of it as a partnership of strengths, Mr. Bennett. You provide the vision, we provide the maturity. David's pen remained frozen. Lucas kept his hands flat, refusing to sell his dignity. Let me make sure I understand this proposal, I said. You are offering $900 million for Aperture on the condition that I step out of the leadership role of the company I built and accept some suit of your choosing to be the public face. In broad strokes, Charles replied with cold certainty, yes. And this new boss would report directly to your family. They would report to the board, where we would naturally hold the majority. I allowed myself one quiet breath, the kind that keeps my fury hidden from their sight. And your rationale is the insulting assumption that I am not ready for this scale. Daniel smirked, speaking up next. The reason, Mr. Bennett, is that we simply do not know you. We only know your numbers. We do not know the man. And at $900 million, we do not buy mysteries. I turned my gaze back to Charles. I value honesty. Let me be equally clear. The coding of Aperture is mine. The team is mine. The vision is mine. I am the sole author. Just a man who began this in a tiny borrowed office above a laundromat to build something you flew across the country to try and take. Vivian quickly leaned in to speak. No one is questioning your hard work, Mr. Bennett. You challenge everything except my sweat. Charles stared at me with the slow patience of a billionaire who outlasted every single dreamer who ever dared to stand up to his money. We have a great deal of respect for what you have built, he murmured calmly. But respect does not change our final terms. Take tonight. Talk with your team. We will meet again tomorrow morning at 10. If our structure is unacceptable, we can shake hands today and walk away with no regrets. His mouth twisted into the cold imitation of a smile. A cold look that did not reach his eyes. $900 million, Mr. Bennett, with our backing, your business becomes a legacy neither of us can build alone. Without us, you are just a promise. We both know which path leads to the better story. I snapped my folder shut, keeping my eyes locked onto his. I will see you tomorrow. I stood up and David rose beside me. We stayed silent until the elevator doors finally closed. They want to buy your soul, David muttered, not just the business. I know, and I only have until 10 tomorrow. I watched the floor numbers slowly tick down. The skyline beyond the glass was growing colder and darker. My reply was quiet, with the absolute stillness that comes when a massive decision is already set in stone. Deep down, there was no turning back. Tomorrow, they will see that my dignity has no price. I spent the night in my office, too restless to go home. The cold lights of lower Manhattan. The skyline bled through the blinds, casting pale bars across the floor. I ordered black coffee twice, but left both cups untouched. Right in front of me sat a single sheet of paper with 2 columns. One column held every reason to accept their massive payout. The other listed why I had to walk away. The second column was shorter, but it carried my dignity. David walked in just after 1 in the morning. He set a fresh coffee beside my cold one and sank into the chair across from me. They aren't buying my company, I said. They're auditioning my dignity. And you failed their audition before you even walked in, David replied. Charles decided that before we sat down it was all cheap theater. I know, then you know what we have to do tomorrow. My reasons to accept were purely practical. Payouts for my team, cash to expand into Europe, and an elite name to buy our way into Washington. $900 million can't buy back 8 years of struggle in a laundromat. It only rents them, but my reasons to walk weren't practical. They were the kind of truths a man only whispers to his own soul. The morning broke gray and bitterly overcast. I put on the exact same charcoal suit from yesterday. I arrived at Hawthorne Tower at 9:54. David walked beside me, holding a single leather folder. We kept silent in the elevator. My dignity wasn't up for rehearsal. Charles, Vivian, and Daniel were already waiting. The expensive mahogany table and arranged chairs looked exactly the same. Even their water glasses were refilled to the exact same height. The Hawthornes wanted this morning to feel like business as usual. "Mr. Bennett," Charles began. "I trust you spent the evening well." "I did." "Then let us not waste each other's time. Have you had a chance to consider our structure?" "I have. I want to walk you through my thinking." Charles nodded slightly. I opened the folder David slid over and pulled out 3 pages. I placed a page in front of each Hawthorne. "Here is Aperture's last 48 months. Revenue, customer retention, infrastructure, and patent filings. Every metric is time-stamped directly against personnel changes. You will see every major growth spike lines up with decisions I made, hires I chose, and code I wrote." Daniel scanned the data with a completely blank expression. He tossed it down without even finishing. "Mr. Bennett, I appreciate the papers, but data is not character. We know how to read charts. What we can't read is if this success is yours, or if you just stood near the geniuses who built it. I just told you it belongs to me, you did." Daniel slowly turned a page in his own leather folder. "I reviewed your background last night, a bachelor's from a state school. No graduate degree, no ties to the major research consortiums in your sector. Your first job out of college was customer support at some payments firm in New Jersey. That is not a profile, just a starting line. I am aware of where I started, I am sure you are. The real question is whether anyone at the next level will look at your origin and see a starting line, or if they will see a ceiling." Vivian leaned forward, asserting her status across the table. Her vintage gold bracelet clinked against the wood, a sharp reminder of the wealth she used to silence him. "Mr. Bennett, may I be honest with you, please? There is a world where you have been quite successful, right at the edge. Tech, data, the kind of business where success is just lines of code. You have done well there, I suppose I admire it. But the elite world we are offering you is entirely different. It is a world of private dinners, legacy boards, and conversations in rooms where the true agenda is never written. The elite in that world will ask the moment you walk in where you came from, and your pedigree will follow you. What are you suggesting that answer is? I am not suggesting anything. I am telling you that your pedigree matters. Our family has spent generations in those rooms. We know how they work. The structure we proposed yesterday is not a demotion, it is a translation. We are offering to translate your identity into a language they actually respect." Lucas felt a cold, unyielding pride settle deep within his chest. Not anger, the quiet strength of self-worth. "You are telling me," he said, "that the business I built is good enough for you. My numbers are acceptable. My technology is acceptable. My growth is acceptable. The only thing about my company that is unacceptable is the man who created it." Vivian offered a superficial smile, old, practiced, and completely devoid of respect. "I would not use those exact words. You do not have to. They are already hanging in the air." Charles gestured coldly with one finger. "Mr. Bennett, let me speak frankly. We only invest in what we understand. We have operated this way for 3 generations. Every deal we have made above $500 million involved a leader with a pedigree we could trace, whose choices we could foresee, whose behavior we have observed and analyzed across multiple shifts in the market. To us you are a mystery, a talented mystery. But you are still a complete stranger." He let that insult sit, trying to crush him. "We are not asking you to shrink, we are just asking you to conform." David's hand tensed on his folder, sensing that money could not buy this man's pride. Opposite them, Daniel tapped his pen anxiously, realizing their wealth had met an unbreakable boundary. The same smug rhythm as yesterday, a steady metronome of condescension. I chose my words carefully. I'd spent all night preparing them. "Mr. Hawthorne, I respect your family's long history. I respect what your name represents in these elite rooms. But I think you have completely misread this deal." "Have I? You believe you are buying a company, one that needs your name to become something bigger." I believe you are buying a business whose entire value is its independence from names like yours. The clients who pay Aperture pay for one reason. They trust that the man who built the system is still running it. The moment someone replaces me in that operating chair, trust resets to zero. Daniel let out a soft, involuntary snort. That is a remarkably generous reading of your own importance. It's not generous, it's accurate. The renewal clauses on my top 20 contracts are tied directly to my role, not the company's to mine. Your due diligence team already has those documents. The heavy silence that followed felt completely different from the others before it. Charles shot a single look at his son. Daniel refused to look back. Vivian's heavy bracelet stopped moving. That clause is highly unusual, Charles said carefully. If accurate, it would be material to our model. It's accurate, verify it tonight. Daniel set his pen down. For once his tone carried something other than pure condescension. If those clauses survive scrutiny, we will need to rethink this leadership role. You will need to rethink far more than just structure, I countered. You will need to question your underlying assumptions. Charles studied me with a long, patient stillness, the look of a man who decided in his 30s never to let anyone move him again. Mr. Bennett, you are a young man with far too much pride. Pride is only useful in small amounts. Too much of it will cost far more than you can ever afford. We are offering you a deal that protects you from your own ego. Most founders in your shoes would have signed by now. Most men in my position weren't starting from the bottom when they were young. Meaning? Meaning I have been told I wasn't ready before, by people who had less wealth than you but far more reason to mean it. I built this entire company anyway. I am not afraid of being told I'm not ready. I am only ever curious when someone tells me what they expect me to give up as a result. Charles's expression stayed blank, but his eyes shifted slightly. He folded his hands again. Then let me ask you a direct question, Mr. Bennett. His voice grew incredibly soft, which was always when he was most dangerous. What exactly do you believe we are offering you, if not a partnership? You are only offering me a price. In exchange for my dignity. You want a version of me that fits comfortably in your elite gilded rooms. You want me quiet. You want me to surrender real power and keep a hollow title. You want my company, but you cannot buy me. Because my self-respect embarrasses the corporate brand you want to paste over it. That is a highly emotional reading. It is the only truth your words actually support. Vivian let out a sharp, dismissive little laugh, but there was absolutely no humor behind it. Mr. Bennett, this emotional outburst is exactly why we have deep concerns. A leader ready for $900 million does not take business so personally. He just executes. Then maybe I am not ready for your $900 million. My ultimatum dropped into the silent boardroom and hung there. I spoke with absolute calm, as if merely stating the temperature outside. Charles slowly reached for his glass of water, taking a deliberate sip. When he finally set the glass down, his voice carried the heavy threat of an elite playing his final card. Mr. Bennett, there will never be another offer at this staggering number. Not from our family and not from anyone in our powerful circle. The doors my family shuts never open for the same person twice. I understand that completely. Do you also understand that the influential people you choose to offend by walking away from our protective structure will never forget this choice? I understand that too, so let me ask you one final time. The deal stands exactly as we proposed. Our choice of operating chief, your founder title, is preserved. $900 million wired at closing. Yes or no? The boardroom fell dead silent. David kept his eyes on the floor. Daniel dropped his pen onto the table, staring at me without any of the arrogant, casual disdain he had brought into the room earlier. I looked Charles Hawthorne in the eye, then down at the table. I caught a brief glimpse of the gray window where the morning had hardened into harsh daylight without any of us even noticing. Then I quietly closed my laptop. Not loudly, but the soft click echoed. I stood up. David immediately rose with me without a single word. I pressed both my hands flat against their expensive, polished table. The way someone does when they want to remember the surface they are leaving behind. Mr. Hawthorne, the answer is no. To the structure, the price, no. To your family. Our business is finished. I didn't wait for his response. I walked the length of that table for the last time, and not a single soul tried to stop me. The shocking news broke before lunch. By the time I stepped into my office, the first headlines were already tearing through the financial wires. Aperture founder walks away from Hawthorne deal. $900 million deal collapses on day 2. The narrative across every outlet was exactly the same. They spun it, my dignity won. They wanted the story spun before the market had a chance to ask what actually happened in that room. David walked in 20 minutes later with 2 phones buzzing endlessly in his hands. 3 board members called within the hour. 2 are anxious, 1 is absolutely furious. The investor relations line had stopped going to voicemail and started going straight to silence because the queue was completely full. And the team? The all-hands is at 3. They will have heard the rumors by 2. Lucas turned his chair slowly toward the window. He thought briefly about the lean years before this office, the borrowed router, the cheap folding table he used as a desk for those first 18 months, the very first hire he had ever made. A junior engineer who took the job because Lucas was honest about the risks and honest about the ceiling. That same engineer was now running their entire infrastructure in Austin. The afternoon dragged by in a series of tense, difficult conversations. 2 of the major institutional investors asked in language that tried to remain polite, asking if he understood what he had just walked away from. A board member who had stood by him since the 2nd year sent a text reading, "Only call me when you can speak honestly." The media inquiries came in relentless waves. Lucas declined every single one. But he did not reject the call from Hartwell Group's senior partner. He had been quietly waiting, without admitting it, to see if that call would come. Eleanor Crane was the rare kind of investor who never chased cheap fame in the press. She ran a private innovation fund that had quietly backed 3 of the most principled, highly disciplined infrastructure companies of the last decade. Lucas had met her twice, and both times very briefly. Both times at conferences where she asked sharper questions in 5 minutes than the Hawthorns did in 2 days. Her assistant patched her through to his line just after 4 o'clock. "Lucas, I read the headlines. Most people did. Most people will assume you made a mistake. I want to hear if you did." "That depends on what the mistake was supposed to prevent." There was a soft, brief sound on her end of the line. Something that sounded like a chuckle. "Fair answer," she replied. "I would like to fly out tomorrow. I won't take more than an hour. If after that hour you still want to stand alone, I will wish you well and leave. If not, I want to talk about what an actual partner looks like for a business at your stage. I will have the conference room cleared for 10 o'clock. 10 works, but the all-hands at 3 was the harder room." Lucas stood at the front of the packed cafeteria, every chair filled. Every railing on the upper balcony was lined with employees who could not find seats. He did not use a slide deck or prepare remarks. He simply told them the truth. He told them exactly what was demanded of him and what he said in return. He told them that the next 90 days would bring deep uncertainty. That some people in the room might decide this fight simply was not worth carrying, and that he would not blame anyone who left. Then he told them one last thing. He told them he had not built Aperture just to sell its soul to a name on a tower. He had built it for the people, not the highest bidder. The ones who sacrificed their nights to keep the dream alive when survival was a daily battle. He spoke the truth plainly once, then let silence do the rest. No cheap applause came. They gave him something far better. A heavy, respectful silence settled, then they quietly went back to honest work. That night, Lucas drove home completely alone. Sitting in the dark, he watched the wealthy, flashing city lights through his window. He questioned if choosing dignity over a fortune was right. The reassurance did not arrive quickly. When the truth finally came, it was an old memory he had not visited in years. A quiet night in their old, cramped kitchen in a small town far outside Albany, when his mother warned him that no amount of money could buy back the self-respect you willingly sell to others. He was only 22 then and completely blind to her wisdom. He finally understood it now. Eleanor Crane arrived at 10 o'clock sharp the next morning. She wore zero jewelry and carried no fancy folders. Her firm handshake showed she was someone who valued substance over empty, wasted gestures. Their intense conversation lasted exactly 92 minutes. By the end of it, she had asked Lucas 11 sharp questions. Not a single question doubted his ownership or who built the system. None of them focused on his elite academic credentials. Her opening question probed his worst hiring mistake and the painful lessons in character he took from it. Her final question was about what he truly envisioned Aperture becoming in 7 years if his creative control was never compromised. That afternoon, she offered an honest partnership. Hartwell Group would fund their growth. Lucas kept his operating control, board majority, and total authority over his team. Her valuation was far lower than $900 million. But it left his dignity intact. No hidden traps, no demands to sell his soul to fit into elitist boardrooms. He proudly signed the clean agreement within the week. The hard months that followed tested his resolve. 2 senior engineers left, calling the rejected Hawthorne fortune a sign of structural weakness. Lucas let them go without begging. A few panicked clients demanded cheaper, renegotiated terms. He accommodated partners who came to him in good faith, and calmly accepted losing the ones playing dishonest games. The greedy financial press kept framing his integrity as a foolish mistake for the entire first quarter. Lucas stayed silent and kept building. By the end of the second quarter, the European expansion he spent 2 years building toward finally opened. A major regulatory breakthrough in Frankfurt, which had been waiting for an honest operator, chose Aperture over its compromised competitors. A massive government contract in the Netherlands quickly followed. By the third quarter, the company crossed a massive revenue milestone that cynical outside doubters never saw coming. And by winter, a major bank released a stunning research note. The very bank that once brokered a dinner to buy Lucas's respect for the Hawthorns. Now named Aperture the most undervalued tech infrastructure asset of the year. Only 15 months after Lucas walked out of the Hawthorne Tower with his head high, Aperture secured funding at a valuation of $2.5 billion. The media outlets that once warned about him were suddenly printing glowing profiles of his success by the summer. Lucas ignored the cheap fame, granting only a single interview. He refused to even dignify the Hawthorns by mentioning their name. He only warned that the most expensive lesson for any founder is mistaking a greedy corporate buyer for a true partner, which is almost always visible in the first 10 minutes if a man cares about his dignity. But the wealthy family could not stay silent. In autumn, they sent a middleman with a very carefully worded request for a meeting. The broker hinted that even Charles Hawthorne now wanted an opportunity to discuss a partnership, realizing money alone could not buy success. Lucas read the email once and typed his own firm response. Mr. Hawthorne, thank you for the message. We do not require your capital at this time. I wish your family well. But they knocked again 2 weeks later. This time, a desperate Daniel reached out directly. His pride had crumbled, the way it does when men who have been certain their entire lives find a door that their massive wealth cannot open. Daniel tried to fake a humble tone, though his fragile pride still bled through, asking if Lucas would share some wisdom privately about the lessons learned. Lucas let the weak request sit overnight. He sent back just 2 sentences, Mr. Hawthorne, the honest talk you want is the one I offered a year ago. You were in the room. He shut that door, and they never wrote again. Of course, the Hawthorne empire did not collapse. Old money rarely faces ruin. But the next time the industry praised Aperture, the Hawthorne family was not even worthy of being in the same sentence. When a major regulatory hearing in Brussels needed a real expert to speak on global tech infrastructure, Lucas was the proud founder they invited. The elite room's Vivian claimed he needed a translation, for now begged him to enter on his own terms. He only visited a select few, and he never compromised his dignity just to fit in. David remained CFO and Eleanor Crane joined the board. His original lead engineer flew in to share a quiet, genuine toast to their victory. The kind of genuine tribute born of shared struggle, something that wealthy elites could never truly buy. Late one night, nearly 2 years after he walked out of the Hawthorne Tower, Lucas stood quietly in his office, looking down at the massive city below. The skyline was unchanged, but his soul had. He remembered that old paper with its 2 conflicting columns. He realized the shorter column, his integrity, was the only thing of real value. I hadn't shrunk under their pressure. I was finally the exact size I always meant to be. The lesson, once I finally admitted it to myself, was too simple to even write down. No massive payday is worth selling your dignity for. The real value of a deal is never the $900 million price tag. It is whether the powerful family across the table actually respects who you are. Sometimes the biggest step you can take toward the future you actually desire is to walk away from the most glittering cage they offer in the present. I switched off the boardroom lights and walked home,